Hi, I'm Lippy.
And I'm Grumpy. Together we're Lippy and Grumpy Do Podcasting.
As I'm still unpacking boxes, in this pre-recorded episode, we talk about kayaking and open plan offices.
Now, Lippy.
Yes.
We're taking a week off.
We have.
Yes, so this is pre-recorded, so there'll be no news items.
No.
We're simply going to cover a topic or two from our big list of topics.
Yes, big list of topics.
So you wanted to talk about kayaking.
Yes, I love a little...
Now, before we start, I think it's worth just mentioning the difference between kayaking and canoeing, because they can be used interchangeably incorrectly. So let's just put matters right. So in a kayak, which is the sort of vessel we're used to, the paddler is seated and uses a double-bladed paddle to effectively row with.
Yeah.
In a canoe, the paddler kneels, which has got to be really uncomfortable for any length of time, and uses a single-bladed paddle to propel the boat forward. Interestingly, both canoe and kayak are raced from club to Olympic level, and I've seen kayak racing on the Olympics before, but I can't remember ever seeing canoeing.
Neither can I. But they do kind of sit in a canoe. It's like they kneel under and then there's a bench above them.
I don't know whether they kneel on a board or whether it's directly on the bottom of the boat.
Strange.
I mean, you tend to think of canoeing with Native Americans.
Yes.
And so I suspect that's probably an American thing, whereas kayak is most definitely a European thing.
Yeah, if you went to hire a water thing that was either a canoe or a kayak, it would definitely always be a kayak here.
Yeah. And then you get white water rafting, where they'll still use one paddle, won't they? And you'll definitely sat down for some of the time.
You're more in an inflatable type of
that's very
thing
true,
for
actually.
it.
I was trying to think of the film Without a Paddle and whether that's
a canoe.
they sat. That's a canoe, but they weren't. Oh, I can't remember. There's a good excuse to watch it again.
Yes. Let's watch it. So we obviously over lockdown has been like not a lot to do. So we started looking at like fun boat trips you can do that like end in a pub, because obviously we're in England. That's what you live your life for, isn't it? You do something fun and you finish it in a pub.
Well, there are many pubs by the side of rivers.
There
Which is quite handy.
Mm. So, and we live really close to Basingstoke Canal. Don't know where it links to. So anyway, we one day decided we'd go down to the little boat hire shop and we'd get some... Well, the first time we did it, we got a rowboat and that was not suitable. It was very wobbly.
The thing I don't like about rowboats is that you face the wrong way. You can't see where you're going. I mean, the mayhem that's going to come from that.
Exactly. Me directing and Chris rowing, you know, I get stressed out. I'm like, there's a bush there, stop rowing into the bush. So yeah, rowboats are not ideal. Don't ever hire a rowboat if you can help it. But then the next time we went, we got kayaks for 2 hours and oh my God, we literally had the best fun. So much fun. Going backwards, sideways and all the tricks.
Tricks? What sort of tricks were you?
We weren't doing tricks, but you know you do tricks in kayaks. You seen those where it like gets to shallow water and they stab this thing in so it lifts the boat up over the shallow bit of water?
Yes, those are the professional athletes that do that.
Yeah,
not somebody that's hired the boat for the first time.
I just ran straight into the reeds instead.
Very good.
But yeah, I highly recommend. On a nice sunny day like this as well, we did it more wintry so it wasn't that warm, but going for a little kayak down a river. Although you do have to change clothes. I didn't think you'd get wet in a kayak, but there was definitely some water spillage.
The professional kayaks, they have a sort of plastic rubbery sheet, spray deck, that goes between you and over there's a very small hole that you have to get your long gangly legs in. Yeah. Which stops water getting in. And also they can roll all the way round if they
That terrifies me though.
Yeah, that does as well. I'll come on to a story about that in a minute. So that's going to stop you getting... Well, not quite so wet, but I think you still get fairly damp. The thing is, a sort of modern kayak, sort of these plastic ones where you sit on, there's no protection at all, so you are going to get wet.
Yeah. Yeah, thankfully I wore a raincoat just in case, but...
And when you look at, so I don't know what they call it, but the kayaking, the slalom where they go through gates.
Yes.
And they built that whole thing in East London for the Olympics 2012, which is brilliant. It's an incredible piece of engineering. because you've got so much action in quite a small space. And it's brilliant on the television as well, because you can see all of it. It's not like trying to film a World Rally Championship where you've got miles and miles where you've got to try and camerize it, if that's a word. And it's so exciting as well. It's one of the relatively few exciting spectator sports, I would say. It is really good. A friend of mine used to be very into it and had a go at Barla Lake in Wales, where they've got this white water channel coming down into the lake. Yeah, he always loved that, to the point where he would dream about canoeing down Everest.
I think you could do that.
Well, I think he'd read a book about it, which I'll have to see if I can find.
I think you might be a bit dangerous, but I reckon you could canoe down Everest.
Well, you've got gravity on your side, and presumably they work on snow. Once you get to the rock, it's going to be a bit tricky.
Yeah. We should try that when we go skiing. Hire a kayak and see how far down we can get.
I don't think that's a good idea.
I don't think we'd get our deposit back for the hire.
No, definitely not. Well, the last time we went kayaking in France, which is probably about 12 years ago, I guess.
I was very young.
You were quite young. So we'd stopped in a municipal campsite with a camper van, and I think we paid €9 for all of us per night.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. It was a bit off season. We were right by the river. The only downside was the lavatories were the drop sort, so they were a bit hard to use. But for €9 a night, you're not going to complain.
I remember that as well, being a very nice campsite.
It was really nice. And we had the bikes with us, so we'd ridden in and had a very nice meal the night before at a restaurant. So we walked up the road to kayak hire place. And
you got it wrong.
Yeah, I did get it wrong. I'll continue to get it wrong as well. Well, when I was in the Scouts, they were always canoes, they weren't kayaks. So, yeah. Can blame somebody else. Anyway, so what the arrangement is they loaded the kayaks on a trailer. You got in a minibus. They drove you for about 20-25 minutes upstream, unloaded you. You got in the river and basically just pootled back. So we did that, and we pootled past the campsite. So we stopped for lunch, pulled them up on the beach there, had lunch, and then carried on. And I thought I understood where we got out. So we'd stopped where I thought we would get out, and we phoned them to come and pick us up. And foolishly, I phoned where I shouldn't have done, because my ability to understand French is very, very limited. And Wife of Grumpy is much, much better at it. So she normally deals with this. So I don't know why I was dealing. Anyway, he said, "Oh, no, you're in the wrong place. You need to carry on." Okay. I thought it was a bit odd, because there's two other blokes with kayaks pulled up.
Stopped,
it must be different. And he said, "Well, you'll go round past the town," he said, "and you'll see this bridge. Well, it looks a bit like where we are, but okay." So off we paddle, and after about 10 minutes, we're getting further and further away from civilization. The road which was running next to us is now about 200 metres above us. I mean, it's ravine. The only plus side is we saw a kingfisher.
Yes.
And you don't see them very often, and they are fantastic. The colour in those is just gorgeous.
But it was a plus side that also caused a lot of issues, I believe, if I remember rightly.
Yes, absolutely. So anyway, we came to the conclusion we'd gone too far. Not for the first time. So Wife of Grumpy phoned and got a completely different person and a completely different answer. They said, no, you've gone too far. You're going to have to go back. We can't pick you up from there. It's no road. So we turned around, and I started paddling and fell out.
Yes.
And discovered there was a hole in the bottom of my boat. So half of it had filled up with water, so it was immensely heavy. Though we decided the best thing to do was to get out of them and to walk upstream. Unfortunately, it wasn't very deep. Now, somebody decided they weren't going to do that because their legs weren't long enough.
I was little. I was small. The water came a lot higher on me than it did on you.
That is very true. And you managed to make such a fuss that it was easier to put you in the boat and pull you.
And to be honest, also, I did try to get out and help. And then Mum said that I was keeping the boat more balanced because we had a two-person
I think she was being polite, yes.
Okay.
So Charlotte's pulling her boat, I'm pulling ours, and Mum's pulling your two boat with you in it.
With me in it.
So after about an hour, I think, of trudging back upstream, we eventually come in the wrong direction towards this bridge. And then there's the bloke stood there with the minibus having a cigarette as he would, enjoying the the surroundings, and obviously heard the splashing, looked round and was absolutely gobsmacked to see us walking the wrong way up the river. But if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't have seen the kingfisher.
No, and followed it for an extra few.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, it's a trip that you'd probably forget otherwise.
Yeah. Well, no, we had a few whitewater rafts on that trip, I remember. On that little kayak.
Yes, we did do another one with my aunt and uncle, or aunt and uncles, there was two of them, around, those south of Clermont-Ferrand in France. And the water was very low because it'd been quite dry, hot and dry. And that was quite good fun, although you had to get out and pull the boat over bits. But there's one corner in particular where people were coming round and the current was they were just going bang into the side of the bank there.
Whipping them round.
Video. Yeah, it was quite funny. And my sister and I did a trip down the Thames in an inflatable kayak. My dad, who passed away about 12 years ago, we decided we were going to raise a bit of money for the hospice he was in. So we created the Thames Challenge for ourselves, which was going from Putney down to Greenwich, because it was the Greenwich hospice he was in. And we picked it very carefully. We picked our times so that we went with the tide, not against it, because it is almost impossible to go the other way. And it was great. And it took us, 2 or 3 hours, I suppose, to paddle down there. But actually kayaking through the middle of London,
it's really impressive.
What an experience.
Yeah.
There was only one bit I was a bit terrified, going between the bridge, and we just caught a bit of an undertow. Thinking, oh God, we're going to go
because around the posts on the bridges, it's very like...
Yeah, it's very disturbed water, as it were. So if you get the opportunity, and there are some kayak clubs that will... Some of them do go against the tide, though, so don't join one of those. Go for the ones that go with
Go for the easy one. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what else you can do on the Thames. Bit sidetracked. You can hire a self-driven hot tub that literally sits at the water level, and you can take alcoholic drinks in there, and you all sit in this hot tub, and it just takes you on a little trip up the Thames and then back down, like self-driven.
Well, I never.
How awesome is that?
Yeah. Oh, I have to look into that. I quite like the idea of that.
Yeah. You get two, have little races.
Well, you don't need to just drift on down.
Have a few beers.
Poodle.
Bring some sandwiches.
On a more serious note, though, there was a post on Facebook from a friend of mine during the week, and he's quite into his kayaking at this time of year, and he goes into one of the local rivers. He says on there, so coming back downstream, I had to paddle between a tree and a bank where the water was rushing through, so similar to posts around the bridges. A bramble caught me across the face, and the next thing I know, I was upside down under the kayak between the tree and the bank, which is not a nice place to be. Obviously, he survived because he wrote the post, so let's not worry too much. So managed to slide out of the kayak, hold onto my paddle, and use it to wedge the boat against the tree so I could spend a moment planning my next steps. So he got the boat back up again and got into it. But he said, a good reminder to start wearing a buoyancy aid.
Because that would pull you up straight away.
Well, the thing is, if you knock yourself out, you've got a good chance of surviving because you would be upright.
You'd be pulled up.
Yeah, exactly. A paddle leash and a throw line. Well, certainly a buoyancy aid. I would never get in a boat of that sort without one, to be honest. I've seen too many people knocked out. You know, if the boat goes over, then the boat's on top
we didn't wear buoyancy aids, but I didn't even think about it. But actually, we probably should have.
Yeah, absolutely should do. I mean, but you know, they're not that stable, to be honest.
No, they're very rocky.
Oh, we did another. Charlotte and I did a bit of an epic trip in Dorset.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, we went from Swanage Bay round to Studland, which was a cracking bit of paddling until we got to Old Harry.
Yeah.
You know, as we turned round Old Harry and start to go into shore, it was a offshore wind and it was very strong. So we couldn't stop paddling. If we stopped paddling, we went backwards.
Yeah.
So that
we
last
definitely picked the right daughters to do that with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you would be no help whatsoever. But it's great. I mean, it's a lovely place to be because there's lots of little inlets around the bottom of the rocks and that. I'm not sure I would go too close to them, to be honest, because there's quite a lot of coming down. And as we talked about a few weeks ago, somebody fell off not so long ago and survived. So.
It's falling people everywhere.
Yes. So I wholeheartedly recommend kayaking because it is lovely. And you've got another point.
I just remembered. I went kayaking in Portugal with some of my female friends. We were on a little
Females?
trip. females. There were 3 of us. So there was all 2 people kayaks, and they take you kayaking around all the caves and things.
Lovely.
It was amazing, to be fair. I am slightly terrified of the ocean in some ways, that a shark is going to come and get me. So my whole aim for the whole trip was not to fall in. It was like the one thing I didn't want to do was fall in. And we were on the way there in the speedboat with the kayaks on the side, and there was a really lovely family, which was 3 of them as well. So I partnered up with the mum, because the dad and the son went together. So me and the mum went together and we shared a kayak. It's lovely little bonding for someone I never see again. But we're going through all the caves and things. It was absolutely amazing and so like cool. And they took you into some really small ones. And then to get out of the caves, they do sort of a one-way system, because there's a lot of kayakers doing the same trip with different companies, obviously. You have to paddle out of this area where it's direct ocean coming straight in. So every 3 seconds, I'm going to say, a huge wave comes pounding in. So you have to time it perfectly. So you have to like hide behind the rock. And then as soon as the wave goes past, you have to paddle as quickly as you can to get out before the next wave comes. And the son and the dad went before myself and their mum went. They did not time it well. And got like flown straight back into the cave, rolled, and they were just like holding onto their thing in the water like, how do we get out now? Obviously all okay, and the instructor just comes around and hops you back in.
Yes. Yeah.
But it looked terrifying, to be fair. You literally just get completely washed over by this huge wave back into the cave. But myself and the mum timed it well, thankfully. I didn't have to experience that.
Well, the desire to stay in the boat, which I think is a very good idea, not necessarily because of sharks, but also the pain of having to try and get back into the boat from the water.
It's hard.
Quite light, so it's easy, but being a bit lardy, it's quite an effort, to be honest, and not something I really... It's a bit like a dinghy, isn't it? Trying to get back into a capsized dinghy.
Yes, yeah, and it's a bit higher, and you're like hoofing yourself up over the higher edge.
So I've always tried not to capsize ever.
Yes, yeah. That's a good rule. Don't end up in the water.
Yeah, going back to Dorset, there's a kayak safari that goes from Kimmeridge Bay, which is a lovely spot.
You can see dolphins on that sometimes, I've heard.
You can, yes. A friend of mine's seen them while sailing, actually. I can't remember what time of year. It was a very long time ago.
We should maybe give that a go.
Well, I think we probably should, to be honest. That'd be quite good fun. I'm not sure Wife of Grumpy would be too keen on it.
Nah, she can take pictures from the side.
Well, possibly. She might prefer a boat-to-boat.
I would like my own kayak this time as an adult.
Yes, well, you're responsible for it, and if you have to walk back upstream, it's yours.
Upstream in the middle of the ocean?
Well, it could happen. Yes, so the Lippy and Grumpy advice is definitely try kayaking. It's great fun. Don't fall out of the boat, and do wear a buoyancy aid.
Yes.
Now, Lippy, I wanted to talk, but not rant, about open plan offices.
Okay.
I really don't like them.
I'm not a fan either, to be honest.
I don't understand why they're so popular with companies.
No.
I've worked at a number of companies that had individual offices and others with open plan offices. By far the most productive are places where you can close yourself away, where it's not too noisy.
But then there is a lot of politics involved in individual offices.
I realise that, and that's something that I don't really understand. Well, I know I understand why it happens, but I don't...
It's like who's got the bigger office, who has more windows.
Or in one place, who was first in terms of the air conditioning, because they then controlled the whole office.
Ooh.
So it came into one, and it literally was a ring. So it would come into one office, he would set it to whatever temperature he wanted. So if it was a constant, say, 18 degrees, then if it was very cold, the rest of us wouldn't get the heating. And if it was very hot, the rest of us wouldn't get the cool air. So we were roasting in the summer and freezing in the winter.
That's not good.
Which has got nothing to do with politics on individual, just some really rubbish HVAC engineering. And we had the same again at the office that we moved out of mid last year. So that was supposed to be a constant 21. And it wasn't, because the same air conditioning did both sides of the building, and one side was in the sun in the morning and the other side was in the sun in the afternoon. So it had a knock-on effect to the other side.
Yeah.
But that's not really why I dislike open plan offices. I have worked in a few where it's worked very well. I worked for Hewlett Packard in Bracknell for a couple of years, and they managed to get it right because they'd been sensible about dividers and screens that stop the noise, and it's mostly the noise that annoys me
Massively.
and I find distracting. Not only the fact that you're pushing bugs around as well, but that's partly the air conditioning or whatever system you've got to get airflow around. So it's not only the open plan offices, but it'll be interesting to see what happens as we come out of lockdown and people start going back to offices, whether they rethink the way that they work and the way that they're laid out. And certainly the new office we've got into is better laid out in that respect, and it's got more rooms where you can go and work quietly. But typically what happens is you don't have enough meeting rooms and too many meetings, which is another rant all of its own.
Yes.
And then you either end up with people meeting in inappropriate places like the canteen or at the desks, and the noise level just goes up and up and up.
Especially in a sales-based office.
Particularly, yeah. Going back to the last office I was in, I was sat right next to the kitchen. So there was all the noise of people going in and out, and next to the support team who were on the phone all day because that's their job. And it just, you need to segregate that. And there was no segregation. There was initially some walls put up, but as they had to squeeze more people into the same space, the walls came down. It was a luxury. One of my favourite films of all time is a film called Office Space with Jennifer Anderson in it. She plays a waitress at a local sort of TGI Friday type place who doesn't quite fit in with putting lots of badges on a uniform and things like that, or flair as they call it. And the local IT company come over. And the premise of the film is that one of the guys is a bit not happy with work and life in general. So he goes to see a hypnotist. And halfway through the hypnotist session, the hypnotist keels over and passes away.
This is a great film.
It is a great film. So this guy is in this constant, just laid back all of the time.
Super chilled.
And I mean, it's a great parody of office life, to be honest, because obviously the company's going through a bit of trouble. So they get some consultants in that cost an arm and a leg. And all they do is they interview the staff and then write the notes up. Yeah. So this guy comes in. He comes in late. He's dressed in shorts and a T-shirt. He removes all the screws from one of the partitions and just kicks it down. So he's now looking out the window. And so they start taking his views seriously because he's a bit different. Yeah. It's crazy. It's a great film. Well worth watching. It's on, I think it's on Disney. But interesting, this office move, the company I'm working for at the moment, have had. So you can't have any personal items. You have this tiny little locker. So, I've collected over the years quite a lot of technical books, some of which have outdated and thrown out. But sometimes you need a pile of books to work through. And it's, I know it's all on the screen, but I actually find books a bit easier sometimes for things like that.
Finding things, yeah.
So the only way you can have those is if you bring them in every day. So just sit the boot of the car and come in every day. It just feels very clinical. And they've now come up with the idea of nobody has a desk. So it's not hot desking as such, but it's you
just come in and
yourselves according to the work you're doing.
Yeah. So
you organise yourself into, and I just find that a bit odd. It's almost you sort of come in, you don't quite belong because you haven't got your space.
Interestingly, I watched a video and read an article from a HR person from their perspective of trying to organise people coming back to work.
Oh, interesting.
And the lady was saying she sent out loads of survey type questions to all the staff saying the main questions were, do you want to come back in full time?
Okay.
If no, how many hours would you like to come in for? And then the options were none, so you could fully work from home, 25%, 50%, etc. And then another question was, do you want your own desk? If the answer was yes, would you be willing to share? And then there was a couple more about hot desking and things like that as well. And she said the issue she had is the majority of the responses, most people they wanted to work full time from home, but have the option of coming in if on a day they decided, actually, I do need to go into the office for this. They didn't want to desk share if that was the case. If they came in, they wanted to come into their own desk, not be sharing it with somebody else. And then she said the other one was that a lot of people said they wanted to do 50% work from home and work from the office. Again, didn't want to share a desk, wanted their own desk. And her summary of it all was, it doesn't matter that all of our staff are working from home the majority of the time. We still need an office space that's costing us X amount a month that can fit 500 desks in for all of our staff, because they all want their own desk, even though they won't be in the office.
That's really interesting. And I can see how that turns out.
Yeah.
And having said about not having personal desks is, you feel a little lost. I think there has to be some flexibility.
Definitely.
And if you want to work at home, I mean, I've worked from home for on and off for 20 years. I'm quite happy not having a fixed desk if it means I can work at home.
Yeah.
Because most of the thinking work I do is at home, and most of the work where you're connecting with other people, you do in the office.
Yeah.
If you're spending most of that time in meetings, that's absolutely
you don't need a desk
fine.
then, really,
So
anyway, do you? If you're in a meeting.
I think another way of looking at it might be to say to the staff, well, if you're going to work at home for a period of time, that means we can reduce the office size. You're not going to have your own desk, but we've saved £100 million a year. We'll give you a percentage of that.
Yeah.
Instead, as an incentive. I doubt that's ever going to happen, but interesting.
Yeah.
Over the beginning of lockdown, I think Google announced they were still building large offices in North London. I can't remember exactly where it is. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there, because they seem to be heading towards the work anywhere type approach, but seem to have done a bit of a U-turn on that.
It's hard for companies like Google that are known for their work environment and known for having comfy seats you can go and sit in if you're feeling a bit tired, and you don't go into work just to work. You go into work and you have social time, and they have really good food and stuff there, and a really good culture as well. And with staff wanting to work from home, it takes that added extra away from them. So like Chris's company, they have really good culture and they go and do a lot of stuff together, and they all still go into the office. But if they were all working from home, that wouldn't be a selling point of the company anymore. It wouldn't be,
absolutely.
We work super hard, but we have all this fun as well.
It's the definition of work super hard. Does that mean we just work for a long time, or do we work really efficiently for 7.5 hours? And I know the way that Chris works in sort of small sprints of work is very, very productive. And I know that works very well for him and for a lot of other people as well. That does require a quiet office, for example, or somewhere you can go. And I think the problem with these jobs that are effectively a lifestyle, so like Google and that, you do end up spending too much time there.
You do.
I think one of the things the COVID period has shown us is it is possible to have a better work-life balance. So, but also working at home destroys that to a certain extent. It's I can do it because I've done it over 20 years. But to begin with, it was very difficult not to have dinner and go back up to the office and do another couple of hours work because it's there. But then it will be there tomorrow morning. So
it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, as a mate of mine says, who's an engineer, he said, I'll work on all night on something if it means by the morning it's done. But if I look at it and go, it doesn't matter if I work for 3 days, it's still not going to be done. I'm not going to work all night because that's pointless. Yeah. It makes no sense at all. I either find a different way to do it, or you say it's not going to be ready.
Yeah.
I've got an article from Wired magazine, which I've always thoroughly enjoyed. And it's talking about Silicon Valley ruined work culture. And one of the things it talks about is things like free dinner can incentivise people to stay in the office longer.
Yeah.
Nap pods suggest you can take a break at work, which you need because you're staying all night. Yeah. So it encourages a different way of working. When I go back to when I first started writing computer code in the 80s, there was one job I had where I put in an immense amount of extra hours, but it was fine because I was single. I actually quite enjoyed what I was doing and was learning a whole bucket load, and it was absolutely fine till I wanted to stop, and then it was a bit tricky. But, for that period, the amount I learned and the benefit I personally gained from that was worth it. But as a lifetime's career, you can't do that all the time. Just your body explodes. This article talks about cubicle farms, which if you're a follower of the Dilbert cartoons, that's where he started. And the chap that started draws the Dilbert cartoons started as working in a cubicle, which he found quite depressing. And Yes, I understand why that is. He goes on to say offices used to be gulags, but at least they had a clear purpose. You wouldn't hang out in a cubicle farm, let alone spend time there on the weekends.
Yeah.
Then companies like Google came along and reinvented the rat race into something with purpose, and along the way confused work with the rest of your life.
Mm.
Now your co-workers are supposed to feel like family, which I sort of understand to a degree, but I think it's going too far, to be honest.
My favourite job, I worked in a small office. It was me and the other girl in my department, and then the 2 people from marketing, and we used to have an absolute ball. We worked when we needed to work. We used to have a great time, but everyone used to leave at 5:30. If anyone stayed late, it would be get up and go home now.
Yeah.
We very much had the culture of don't stay late. Like we're not the kind of people that stay late. It's going to be there tomorrow. Go home.
Absolutely. And interestingly, Scott Adams, just remember the guy that wrote The Right Stilbert, he wrote a couple of books in the 90s, and he created this fictitious company and basically he just filled it with all these likes and dislikes. And one of the things he said, I'm going to name the company Go Home at 5.
Yeah.
And everybody goes home at 5. I mean, obviously, it's difficult if you're a small company and you've got a bit of a crisis on, then, yeah, sometimes you have to put in extra time, and that's absolutely fine. But as everyday working extra hours, unless you can see an end to it or it's a means to an end. But if it's just your job, no. And stay out of open plan offices.
Yeah.
It has to be said, though, there are some benefits to open plan offices. You get a good idea of what's going on. You can gossip. You can poke fun at people as they walk past that you wouldn't necessarily see. So I suppose there are some benefits, but I think overall, in terms
not work
of
benefits though.
No, none
None of the benefits are proactive work benefits.
Absolutely. And what I don't understand is why there hasn't been more research into this. And either I'm completely wrong, which is a distinct possibility, but there have been a number of articles in various magazines, and we're not talking about Railway Modeller or Bike here, in sort of business magazines that say that it doesn't work. But it's a trend, and that's the problem. A lot of companies pandering to trends and shareholder perception. You have to sort of go along with it, really.
I do think a lot of younger workers do like it because you can hide easier in an open plan office.
Possibly right, actually.
You can do things like not pick up the phone as frequently because your manager who's overseeing 20 people in one space can't actually see how often or hear you on the phone or not on the phone.
You are suggesting that the young people are work shy.
I think a lot of young people struggle to call out and answer phones when they first go into work. I know I definitely did, because with mobile phones you can see exactly who's calling you. You can see if you want to pick it up or not. But with landline phones, especially office ones, don't tend to have that system on there, or you're not going to know the person you're answering the phone to.
Yeah, cold calling is very difficult. Really difficult. Yeah, I think I don't get any training for it either. No. That's the thing. I mean, there must be ways of dealing with it. But
my training was just keep going until you get used to it.
But then there's techniques that make it easier, make it more efficient. See what I mean? There's no point just banging on the same thing that you don't know what you're doing and getting the same results. It's crazy. Anyway, we have diverted a little bit from open plan offices and my rant to making cold telephone calls. So it'll be interested to hear your experiences of offices, whether you have a preference or not. Certainly mine is smaller offices. I've worked in some very old houses, which have been quite fun. So they're completely inappropriate for an office in terms of layout and seating heights and things like that. But they seem to be the greatest fun.
At my young age, I worked in a stable converted into an office at a manor house.
Yeah.
Great, loved it. The gardener's loos next to us.
So, Lippy, have you got a top tip for us?
I do have a top tip. So, if you're out picnicking, or maybe at the beach, or maybe just heading somewhere and you want a beer, obviously if you're not driving, don't do this if you're driving because that's illegal. If you forget a bottle opener, you can use the metal part of your seatbelt to remove the lid of a bottle.
Can you really?
Yeah.
Well, I never.
The little hole in the middle of the metal?
Yes.
Clip that over and up.
I think I'm going to have to try that.
Yeah.
See if that works.
There's my top tip. Please don't use that whilst you're actually the designated driver. Only use that if you're the alcoholic passenger.
Yes, quite. Yes, it used to be when I was a scout that a scout belt would open a bottle because we had Coca-Cola then, bottles
Yes.
with tops. So
Not beer.
It's not beer. Oh, that's a very good one. We'll try that.
Okay.
So I have a fact.
Yes.
It's also almost an on this day thing,
Oh.
and it's a good piece of advice,
Okay then.
but it's not fun.
Well, we can make it fun.
I don't think so.
Okay.
So, on June the 17th, 1797, which is my birthday, obviously
Yes.
not 1797, but June the 17th is, Persian King Aga Muhammad Khan ordered 2 servants to be executed for being too noisy.
Rude.
I
I would
not
not.
really.
I would not stay alive very long in that lifetime.
No, you wouldn't. Definitely not. No. Since it was a holy evening, he delayed their executions until the next day and made the servants resume their duties. That night, they assassinated him.
That is quick thinking.
Quick thinking, but it does go to prove that you should not put off to tomorrow
No.
what you can do today.
Well, especially if you're going to kill someone,
Yes, absolutely.
they'll kill you
Yes.
first.
Yes, if you're planning on executing somebody, do it today,
Yeah, not tomorrow.
not tomorrow.
Obviously in the 1700s, not in the 2000s, because we don't do that
No,
kind of thing
definitely
anymore.
not. No, that wouldn't be sensible now. But I think executing people for being too noisy is quite a good policy.
I don't, if I'm
No.
honest.
No, can't think why.
Too noisy all the time.
Anyway, normal Lippy and Grumpy Do podcasting service will be resumed next week.
Yes.
And we should be back to picking out very odd and weird news items again, provided Lippy's move went well.
Yes, otherwise it will be a 40-minute podcast on what went wrong.
Well, we might just replace it with the one we've done previously.
Yeah.
Here's episode 1 again.
Yeah, just for those who didn't hear it first time round.
That's it for this podcast. Thank you so much for listening.
You can help spread Lippy and Grumpy's view on life by leaving a review on your favourite podcast platform.
If you're not sure how to leave a review, or if you download from Spotify, there's some help at lippyandgrumpy.uk/review.
And if you would like to get in touch, email podcast@lippyandgrumpy.uk.
So it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.